Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. All right, it's time to take your questions, and we're starting off on Bluesky. And first up is Tim Ford, who asked a six-part question, but we'll take them one at a time as we go here. And some of them are connected, so we'll kind of do them that way. So first one, if Poilievre doesn't get 80+% at his leadership review, do you think he resigns? And if he resigns / loses, who are the heir apparents? Okay, I don't think he would resign because I don't think that's in his particular ego. If they will make excuses in part because he is seen as the most popular conservative leader since Stephen Harper. He didn't win this time. They will blame everything under the sun except their own performance. So I just don't think he would voluntarily resign. I think it would require extraordinary measures for that to happen. As for heir apparents, I can't think of any offhand, because it also depends on how the party dynamics will shift. And whether the appetite for the kind of sort of MAGA-y stuff is still there, given what's going on in the US and basically the end of democracy in that country, or if you've got a bunch of fans in this country who think, hey, we should do that too, and find someone else like that within the party. I personally don't think that's where it's going to go, but hard to say given just the shifting dynamics right now. Second part, who do you peg as NDP leaders, and how can a new NDP leader redirect the party to better fortunes? What must be done to the internal party structure? Hard to say at this point again. I know Heather McPherson has been considering putting her name in the ring. I'm sure we're going to get, like an Abby Lewis or something like that. I'm sure there will be a couple other outsiders who think that that they have the magic touch. How can they redirect the party to better fortunes? Part of it is, I guess, trying to reconnect with, the kind of blue collar grassroots that the NDP really kind of abandoned for the last few years because they were chasing urban progressives. And I don't know that those two demographics necessarily talk to each other very well. I think that's why the Conservatives picked up so many former NDP seats. So I think there's something to be said there. But in terms of the internal party structure, I think that's an open question. The NDP is unique in that they are both federal and provincial under the same organizational structure and same essentially mechanism. So if you buy a provincial membership, you also get a federal membership and vice versa, which has its own particular problems. The Alberta NDP have recently voted at a convention to end this practice within that province. That could send shockwaves through the party, in part because it allows the federal NDP to not, to basically piggyback on the work of the provinces to do a lot of the grassroots engagement and so on. And that's one of the reasons why they don't really have grassroots in Quebec, is because they don't have a provincial party there, and they did try to stand one up and it went absolutely nowhere. But that's, again, why the federal party had such a hard time trying to cultivate grassroots in that province, is because they really didn't know how, because they normally leave that up to the provincial wings of the party and they just kind of piggyback on that. Maybe these are things that they need to start thinking about internally. We'll see. I don't know that they have enough self-reflection to be able to do that, but you never know. Next question from Tim is the the liberal Quebec Liberal Party. Sorry. Jumped in the polls and seems to be gobbling up CAQ support. Is this good news for federalism? We don't know how much of this is just a new leader bounce. In case you did not hear, Pablo Rodriguez, former federal MP, just won the leadership of that party. So we don't know how much of that is just, people reacting to the newness of it. It's also the CAQ's gotten long in the tooth. People are getting kind of tired of Legault. So he's dropping in that regard. I'm not sure in terms of for federalism, because the Parti Québécois has also jumped a lot in the polls. They were almost extinct and have raced back up to first or second place within the polls within the province. So, I mean, I don't know that that the PLQ is really the sign for federalism, given the PQ is also kind of resurrected itself. So I wish I had a better crystal ball there, but I think this is more the fact that Legault has become deeply unpopular, and Quebecers are now searching for their alternatives. And last question from Tim is there any scenario under a non-conservative prime minister where you see Alberta shaking the UCP? To an extent, yes. If the breakaway MLAs who are trying to revive the PC brand are successful in that could splinter the UCP. Likewise, the Alberta separatists who are now trying to make a big push, they could also splinter from the UCP, and the united conservative aspect of that party will no longer be the moniker. They will no longer be united. So I think that's a more likely scenario, that they fracture that vote within the province that would allow the NDP to come up the middle. But you never know. Alberta's weird like that. I mean, it has operated as a de facto one-party state for so long that sometimes they will choose a party that they know is a problem because they just can't fathom anything else. That's partially why the progressive conservatives had such a dynasty for so long. They would, when they got into trouble, they would just change leaders rather than have voters change the party, which created some of their own, some of the problems that they had for so long. Other question on Bluesky is from David Hutchison, who asks, a GST hike is proposed in that C.D. Howe Institute report to help meet defense spending. What are your thoughts? And he says, I think one should have been used to pay for COVID. No new taxes is pure Tea Party. I do think a GST hike is probably not a bad idea. That was one of the reasons why Stephen Harper was so insistent on reducing the GST by 2 points, was that it would permanently hobble federal spending capacity to create new programs. That was why he did it. Because he knew it would be politically toxic for the federal government to try and bring it back up. And some provinces jumped into that tax room and raised their provincial PSTs to fill some of those points. So there would have to be some kind of negotiation around there, likely. I mean, I do think a GST hike would solve a lot of problems in this country. But it's the political palatability of that. That's the real question. And given that everyone in this last election ran on tax cuts, even though no one could afford them, I think is a problem, and is kind of an indication of how politically unpopular it could be to do the GST hike, even if it is, like I said, would solve a whole lot of problems. All right, we're going to move over to Twitter, and Ryan St. Jean asks, is Damien Carrick breaking lobbying laws with his new job? Unlikely. It's not the first time an MP has gone from office or public office to a lobbying firm or a government relations firm. It's just a question of what he does there. So if he is not directly lobbying during the next 5 years, he won't have broken any rules. Often former MPs or public office holders will go into advisory positions, so they will advise on the legislative process or so on. But if they don't lobby directly to the government, then it is usually not in contravention of the rules. So that's likely what's going to be happening there. John Wright asks, with all of this EU talk, and he says, I'm in favor of closer ties, although EFTA type arrangements are far more likely. I'd love to see some informed opinion on how rule taking from the EU impacts provincial jurisdiction. How does that work given our enlightened provincial governments? So if we were to adopt more EU regulations, that would definitely have an impact on provincial jurisdiction, because a lot of the things that would be regulated would fall under their umbrellas, which is part of the reason why, for example, the CETA trade agreement required provincial sign-off, was because so much of what it would do would impact on the jurisdiction of the provinces, and so it would absolutely impact on them. That's one of the reasons why it's unfeasible. If you go through my history on this channel, you'll see a conversation I had with Kevin Milligan a few weeks ago, and we did talk about this notion about the EU and why Canada would be really unlikely to join, given all of the rules that the EU would impose when we had a hard enough time breaking down interprovincial trade barriers for 150 some years, because of the autonomy of the provinces and the fact that some of those rules were there for good reason. And breaking them down is possibly going to cause some unintended side effects in the next few years, and that is possibly going to cause some problems that we will have to have some kind of negotiation on their way out of. Angus Bell asks, one of the Liberal government's biggest failures has been their failure to enforce proper allocation of health transfers. How easy would it be to hold provinces accountable, and why is there such a reluctance to do so? It is not easy at all, because they are sovereign in their own jurisdictions. We have a division of powers, not a delegation of powers. So under healthcare, provinces have their own authority. Why is it so hard to enforce the transfers to be spent on healthcare? Because we didn't put enough strings attached, because provinces scream and yell when we do. But Justin Trudeau, in the last round of health transfers, made them contingent on these action plans that provinces had to come up with, and basically show that they were living up to those action plans before they got the next tranche of the transfers. And the provinces did not like this one bit, but one by one they did eventually sign these action plans with federal government, and that was basically necessary because we have been through so many rounds of increased healthcare funding that was not spent on healthcare. And for example, those transfers that Jane Philpott negotiated around mental health and home care did not get spent on mental health and home care. And so this was Trudeau's way of saying, enough is enough. We're going to try and put some more strings on this money that we're giving you. And we'll see if that approach worked more, or if under Carney that those action plans fall to the wayside and we get more of the same. Time will tell, but that's essentially what happened there, and that's why it's so hard to basically try and have any kind of accountability over where that federal money goes. Last question is from Chris Berthelot, who asks, do you think Poilievre will ever address Alberta separatism either before or after the by-election? He kind of has already. There's a couple of pieces in, for example, the National Post, where he says that Alberta separatists have legitimate grievances and that he accuses the Liberal government of telling Alberta to pay up and shut up, which is not how equalization works. And the federal government can't tell Alberta to pay up because Alberta pays through income taxes like everyone else does. And they certainly haven't shut up. Really, they have not. So again, this is a lot of just trying to blame Trudeau for essentially the collapse of oil prices since 2014, before Trudeau was even in power. But again, it's a lot of crybaby behavior and grievances that don't actually add up to what they think the problem is. But yeah, I mean, so Poilievre has said that. I don't think he's going to be saying much more, other than if he does, it'll be to just blame Trudeau and say that that's why people need to elect him in order to, give Alberta what Alberta wants. Even though the Conservatives, the last time they were in power, didn't really give Alberta everything they wanted either, and said things like no one pipeline is a national priority, or things like that. So yeah, that's federalism for you. But so I would expect if Poilievre does say something more, that's what it's going to be. And that's everything for this week. Thank you for all of your questions. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter and journodale no_ on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.